How much do you really need to retire? I'll tell you, this question comes up all the time, whether we're dealing with existing clients or talking to prospects. It's a question on a lot of people's minds. And we're going to do a lot of other videos on, that are related to this topic, how much you really need to retire. What if you have a certain amount and you want to find out if it's going to last you through retirement? But today we're going to really talk about what are some of the key things to take into consideration when you're thinking about entering into retirement, or if you're already in retirement, some of the things to take into consideration. So there's this big misconception that you need like this magic number to retire. Some people say you need 1 million, some people say you need 5 million, but it really, really depends on your personal circumstances. Because if you're like a really big spender, having $5 million in the account, that's going to go by really, really fast. But if you're pretty frugal and have $1 million, that could be, enough to live off of when you retire. So it really depends on your circumstances on exactly how much you need. The approach to how much you need to retire should be really taken from a different perspective, which we're going to really delve into today.
Yeah, retirement needs are personalized, right? Depends on your lifestyle, how much you spend, how much you saved leading up to retirement, what inflation is going to look like in retirement. So it's widely varies from person to person. So it also depends on when you retire. Some people love working and retire later. Some people want to retire early. Some people have longevity in their family and they're going to live to be 100. Some people don't and they're going to live for a shorter period of time. So these are factors that always come into play and are considerations when determining how much money someone might need to make it up to and through retirement.
Yeah. You mentioned the point about, length of time during retirement. We sometimes meet with people where they're like, I want to retire at 40. And, if they've got longevity in their life where they're going to live to 100, that's like 60 years of having your money last during retirement, which is a really long time. Some people, that situation, you're basically retired longer than you actually have worked.
Double. Yeah, exactly.
You've actually worked to build up your retirement. So taking that into consideration, and also the inflation factor you mentioned, like if you assume you're going to get $10,000 a month, and $10,000 a month may seem like a lot of money right now, but in 10 years and 5 years, just the inflation factor alone is going to erode away into that.
Yeah, that's right. And also, what are the investment returns going to be? If you have a very high risk tolerance and are okay with market volatility, then your return assumptions might be higher than somebody who has a more conservative approach to investing and doesn't want to take as much risk. Yeah. So those return assumptions are also going to change what amount of money you might need at the beginning of retirement. Plus, other sources of income. Do you have a rental property? Are you getting Social Security? Is Social Security a substantial amount of the amount of money that you need to spend each month or each year? Do you have a pension? All of these things, again, factor into this larger question of how much of your portfolio are you going to need each year. So, which changes the outcome of how much you need to start your retirement, and I don't really think there's one number you need to start retirement because of all of these other factors, and everything's dynamic. It's always changing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the benefit of working with professionals. You can always adapt your financial plan to account for these changes.
Yeah, I agree. I think whether you're in retirement or you're close to retirement, something to really take into consideration is your spending needs, right? Your spending habits. And kind of really taking your spending and splitting it up into discretionary spending versus fixed expenditures or fixed spending. And I'd say things that fall into the fixed category are like rent or mortgage, groceries, insurance, Medicare premiums. These are things you really can't change, right? You have to spend your money on these things.
Right.
And so you have to budget for those and see how much you're going to be spending on those during retirement. Also, if there's an inflation factor associated with that, taking that into consideration. So for example, if you got a home mortgage and it's a fixed rate for 30 years, you can rest assured that that's not going to change. But your Medicare premiums may change. Your grocery bills definitely will change. So thinking about what some of the items that are fixed and which ones are discretionary. And some discretionary items are things like eating out, traveling, whether if it's like entertainment that you're doing, things like that are discretionary and things that you can easily probably cut from your spending during retirement.
Yeah, and it's important to use realistic numbers for that calculation. You don't want to say, in retirement I'm not going to eat out as much, or I'm not going to travel, or whatever. You need to use realistic numbers. Otherwise, the assumptions we use are not going to help really illustrate what your return is going to look like.
And I've actually heard people say that, I'm not going to eat out when I'm in retirement. So it's really tough to change your habits. Like if you've been eating out, a couple times a week before retirement, and all of a sudden you're like, I'm not going to eat out anymore during retirement. That's just not going to happen. Also, when you're thinking about like expenditures during retirement, there's this concept of when you're in retirement, there's essentially 3 phases. There's a go-go phase, There's a slow go phase and there's a no go phase. I know it sounds kind of weird, but basically the go phase is the early part of your retirement where you're excited about retirement. You're doing a bunch of international travel. You're doing, you're exercising. You're doing all these different hobbies, and you're essentially enjoying your life, which is what you're supposed to be doing during retirement. That's the goal. But you're also probably spending a little bit more, right? And then you have your slow go years where you're not as mobile as you used to be. You're starting to slow down. Maybe you're not doing as much international travel. You're starting to do more domestic travel. You're still exercising and working out, but the pace of life has kind of slowed down a little bit. And then lastly, you have your no-go years where you're essentially, sitting at home, or hopefully you're still exercising, but you're definitely not traveling because it's too hard. But your life is just really slowed down quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe you're paying for those budgeted but unexpected expenses like healthcare or in-home care, things of that nature.
Yeah, and you're probably spending a lot of time going to doctor's appointments that time.
There's a lot of
years. I know my parents. I mean, every time I talk to them, I went to 3 doctor's appointments today.
So there's some key factors that determine how much you're going to need in retirement. There was this sort of old theory that you could live off of 60% of your pre-retirement income. We don't see that. I think especially early on in retirement, people spend exactly how much, if not more, than they spent in their working years. So really the target should be somewhere between 70 to 90% of your pre-retirement income. It's a little bit less because you're not paying into Social Security, you're not paying into Medicare, you don't have that earned income. So some of your expenses are declined as you start retirement. But the idea that it's going to drop to 60% is just unrealistic in our experience.
Plus you got the go-go years right in the beginning. Like you said, you have that higher expenditures in the earlier years.
Yeah. And then we're budgeting for longevity risk, right? Is there longevity in your family, and will people in your family, or do people in your family live to be in their 90s or 100 years old? The average life expectancy is somewhere in the 80s, but if that is not the case for you and your family, we need to make changes to the plan that account for the fact that realistically you're going to live longer than the average life expectancy, and adapt the portfolio as a result of that. Also, inflation, everyone knows the word inflation, but really it will slowly erode how much money you will need to take from your portfolio. And as everything increases in cost, this inflation that you won't feel right away, and then all of a sudden the money doesn't go as far as it used to, that's where your portfolio is going to chip in and kind of help carry the difference. So we have to account for that in our planning as well. And lastly, tax considerations. Taking money out of different accounts has different tax implications. Selling long-held assets has different tax implications. And how that fits into the overall portfolio, when you should sell, when you shouldn't sell. Try and kind of marry all of those decisions together are some considerations some things we're taking into consideration when developing a plan.
Yeah, you mentioned inflation. I mean, inflation really is a silent killer. For a long time, I don't know if you remember, we were telling our clients inflation's around the corner, because it was just so flat for so many years.
Long, right.
And all of a sudden, inflation hit us really hard, and it doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. So it really is very important to take inflation into consideration.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about the withdrawals during retirement. Sometimes you have RMDs related to a retirement account, sometimes you don't, and then how much you need to take out of those RMD accounts and your brokerage accounts. It's really a balancing act every year that kind of changes.
Right. One of the other things that we hear a lot is the question of the 4% rule, which is the concept that you should have enough at retirement that you're able to withdraw 4% per year and still have a high likelihood that the account that that your money will outlive you, that your money will last you up to and through retirement. So this is a little bit of a simplified version of how distributions in retirement work. It's based off of the concept of a 60% stock, a 40% bond portfolio, sort of your typical average balanced retirement portfolio. And again, it's a little bit simplistic because it really depends on each individual person's facts and circumstances. Some clients want to be more aggressive, and that 60-40 portfolio doesn't work for them. Some clients want to be more conservative, and if you're more conservative, maybe you can't take out that 4% every year because you're not taking the commensurate amount of risk that would allow you to take that much from your portfolio and keep up with inflation, as we've already talked about.
If I could just add one other thing related to that. So on the 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks and then 40% bonds, when when you take money out of a portfolio, you have to make sure that that allocation remains, because if that's what your risk tolerance and goals are based off of, you don't want to be in a position where you take out from the fixed income part. Now all of a sudden your portfolio is unbalanced and you have a lot more stocks than you do fixed income. And especially as you're progressing through your retirement, that could be really detrimental, because you could be exposing yourself to a lot of risk.
Right.
So you're taking money out, you want to be mindful of the tax implications, but also mindful of what your portfolio's allocation looks like after you take the money out.
And I think also in this environment, probably for the last 15 years, the fixed income allocation of the portfolio, maybe that's not performing as well as that base model 60-40 portfolio that the 4% rule was based off of used to in the day, right? Where low interest rates environment, low yield on bonds, which then makes 40% of your portfolio not really able to keep up with the cost of living and how much money you might be needing to take out to fill the gap between your income and what the portfolio provides in your daily spending.
But I'd say that on the fixed income side, we view it more about the preservation of the capital, the preservation of the portfolio, and not so much the income that it generates. Now rates have gone up a little bit, so it does generate a little bit of income, but the main objective of that fixed income component is for capital preservation, basically like a cushion in the event that the markets go down during retirement.
Right. I think probably a more complex way to think about the withdrawal strategy in retirement is strategic withdrawals based on how the market's performing. Yeah. So years when the market is down, if you don't need the money, taking out a little bit less to give the assets that have declined in value time to recover. And in years when the market's done really well, taking about a little bit more to kind of fill the coffers for the years when the market hasn't done as well. And I think that's probably a more practical approach than just taking out 4% every year, regardless of what your actual need ends up being.
Yeah, but don't get too greedy when the market goes up and start taking up a lot of your portfolio, or don't assume wrongfully that upward market's going to consistently be up every year.
Right.
We do have down years as well.
Of course.
So for a lot of retirees, they go into retirement with a guaranteed portion of income and also a market-based portion of income. And the guaranteed portion of income are things like Social Security, pensions, maybe a fixed annuity. Those things are fixed. I mean, those things, not so much fixed, but they're guaranteed. You know you're going to get that amount during retirement. But the market-based income is essentially things that are IRAs, brokerage account, maybe a SEP IRA, 401k. Those things are market-based because the return is primarily driven on the market return. So if you have a portfolio that declines in value significantly, then you're not going to be able to take as much out from that portfolio. So it's not really a guaranteed return from that. And you want to have a good balance between the two, right? So if you have that benefit of having a large part of the guaranteed income from the pensions and Social Security and annuities, and a small part of it is from market-based returns or market-based income, then that allows you to take a little more risk with the market-based income. Because for example, if your monthly expenses are, again, I'll use $10,000 as an example, and you get a $9,000 fixed income, including Social Security, pensions, and annuities, then the $1,000 difference has to be made up from the marketable securities, which is not a heavy load, right? You can easily do that. But if it was flipped around, where you have $10,000 of expenses, you've got $1,000 of Social Security income, now your IRAs and 401ks have to generate $9,000 of income every month to sustain you during retirement.
And sometimes people like to take their invested retirement accounts and at retirement use a portion of it to buy into an annuity.
Yeah, that's right.
And kind of create their own fixed income from their investment portfolio. So again, that sort of de-risks the portfolio a little bit by taking that money, giving it to the insurance company, and then getting a fixed income stream as a result of that lump sum from your retirement account.
Yeah, that's a very good point I didn't think about.
So that's going to segue us into Social Security. And the question we get all the time, which is, will Social Security be there when I retire? Obviously, no one knows for sure. We're highly confident that Social Security will be there for people when they retire, predominantly because I can't see any administration letting it die. That would be...
It's like the third rail. Like no administration wants to touch that and have that go bankrupt. So they'll do whatever they can to keep it around. It just probably won't represent a big part of your retirement income when you retire. That's
right.
It.
And I think to make sure it gets to that point, like I'm fairly confident it will get to, they'll have to make some changes. They're going to have to maybe increase retirement age where people can start taking Social Security, remove the cap on earnings so that high income earners are paying significantly more into Social Security than they would ultimately be able to take out in their retirement years. So they can make tweaks and changes where effectively it stays in place. Maybe it's a smaller portion of your retirement benefit, as you mentioned. Maybe it costs you more up to up to retirement, but ultimately it remains alive and there for people who need it, or where it will be their primary source of retirement income down the line.
So I'm pretty confident that Social Security is going to be around there at least when we retire. I'm pretty confident it's going to be around at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. And then as a dovetail to that question, let's assume Social Security is still around. People ask, should I take Social Security early?
Yeah.
And this is a complicated calculation. Some people feel very strongly that they don't care. They're going to take it right when they are able to at early retirement, which is fine. You get a smaller benefit. You get an actuarially decreased benefit based on your life expectancy and the fact that they're giving it to you sometimes 5 years earlier than you would normally be eligible to get it. And as a result, all other increases in Social Security for cost of living adjustments will also be less each year going forward. Yeah,
and you mentioned something about longevity, and that's really important because Social Security Administration doesn't know if you've got any health problems or if you're gonna, how long you're gonna live. They go just based on actuarial tables. So if you know that you've got health problems and you're not gonna live very long, then absolutely it makes sense to take it on as early as possible. Even if you have a lot of longevity, it might make sense to take it as early as possible, recognizing that you're giving up some of that additional income you're gonna get. But as Matt mentioned, as you mentioned, it's based off of everyone's circumstances, because if you're trying to factor in that guaranteed part of your income stream during retirement, and if you're committed to taking a smaller amount, that could have a detrimental impact on your overall income that you're getting during retirement.
I mean, not only that, but if you cut off the last, let's call it 3 or 4 years of your working years, sometimes those are your highest earning years.
Yeah.
So then the calculation to arrive at how much your Social Security benefit will be is going to be based off of lower earning years than it could potentially be based off of. All of that is to say the calculated benefit you would get from Social Security is going to end up being less if you truncate the last 3 or 4 years of your last 3 or 4 working years of your overall plan. And the difference between what you get in Social Security and what you need from your portfolio is called your retirement gap. Mm-hmm. So we'll jump into gap analysis and how do you calculate your retirement gap. Again, the difference between the fixed income, the amount you can expect every month, and the amount that your portfolio has to provide for you. So the first step in the gap analysis goes back to the fixed versus discretionary expenses.
Yeah.
How much do you need to spend? Or how much do you need every month to make ends meet? Mm-hmm. Factoring in those fixed expenses and also the discretionary ones that are kind of making your retirement worth it. It's difficult. Each person's is going to be different, as we mentioned earlier. So there's no fixed number. There's no amount that is the exact right amount. And honestly, different people spend differently on even those discretionary pieces. Like what would be a perfectly sufficient dining out budget for some person might be completely insignificant for somebody else.
Yeah, you don't want to see my dining out budget.
That's the significant part of the analysis. And again, using realistic numbers here is very important. Otherwise, the information we give you is going to be worthless.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the benefits, I think, of retiring. At least for me, is when I retire, I want to be able to go out and spend some money on nice dinners because I just don't do it now, so I might as well do it when I'm retired.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, right? Sacrificing now for that retirement, right? Saving now for that retirement. And then, again, it requires calculating the difference between how much you're expected to receive every month through Social Security and pensions and figuring out how much your portfolio has to plug, the difference that your portfolio has to plug. And honestly, this is one of the most important, the cash flow analysis done with the gap between fixed income and your portfolio is one of the most important analyses we could do because it really helps figure out how much you'll be withdrawing from your portfolio, which then helps indicate how long your portfolio is going to last you.
Yeah, exactly. So one thing we haven't talked about yet is healthcare expenses during retirement, which are a huge factor.
Oh, yeah.
Now, luckily, when you retire, there is Medicare. So Medicare does defray some of the healthcare expenses, but Medicare doesn't cover everything, So that's why you have Medigap insurance, which helps kind of supplement that gap with some of the expenses that Medicare doesn't cover.
So with that's an additional insurance you have to pay for, right? On top of Medicare, this Medigap policy, which covers the stuff that Medicare doesn't. And one of the things that I think a lot of times people don't know, they think Medicare's free and that's it. You're paying for Medicare. You've paid into Medicare, so that covers the cost. You also pay a premium each month for Medicare,
right? And
that is based on how much money you make. So your premium will increase or decrease in years where your income isn't as high to a floor, but your Medicare premiums will increase in years where you have a higher income.
Yeah, and it's called IRMAA. Basically, the income-related monthly adjustment amount is essentially how much they're going to determine your Medicare premium based on how much your earnings are. And the threshold changes every year. So if your income goes above that threshold, even by $1, your Medicare premium could go up significantly.
Yeah, and it looks 2 years in arrears. So in 2025 tax year will affect your 2027 Medicare premiums. So it's very important to continuously be thinking about this plan and strategize around how much income you're going to realize, how much assets you're going to sell from your portfolio, so you don't get caught flat-footed when that notice comes in the mail.
Actually, you mentioned how much assets you're going to sell from your portfolio. So one of our clients, we intentionally look at the portfolio every year, this person's income, and only sell up a portion of the portfolio needed to pay the expenses, but not more than we need because to be below the Medicare premium threshold. So we don't want to push this person above the threshold and have them pay more for Medicare premiums.
Right. So those are the predictable costs. There's obviously out-of-pocket costs that you can budget for mentally, but you don't really know how much those are going to be in retirement.
Right.
How long you're going to be healthy, how much those doctor's appointments are going to cost. So budgeting for that and factoring that into the plan is also really important.
Yeah, for example, long-term care. I mean, long-term care is very, very expensive, and you can either do long-term care insurance, which is also very costly, and you'll have to do it for quite some time. I don't even think it covers that many years, right?
Yeah, it can't.
Maybe 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Or you can try to self-fund long-term care, which is essentially nursing home care or home health care. But the cost of health care just overall is a big part of retirement expenses and something that has to be factored into your daily budget. There's one thing we didn't talk about that's related to retirement expenses, and that's HSA accounts.
Yeah.
HSA accounts are phenomenal. We're huge fans of HSA accounts. If you're able to contribute to an HSA account, which is a health savings account, before your retirement, that allows you to put money into this account that's triple tax advantage. You get a tax deduction. The money grows tax-free, tax-deferred, and the money comes out tax-free as long as it's used for healthcare-related expenses. But you can use that HSA to pay for Medicare premiums. You can use it to pay for health, long-term care insurance and premiums, and nursing home expenses.
Yeah, all those out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. So yeah, big fans of the HSA, and this is exactly what deferring for all those years up to retirement, this is exactly where it comes in handy. And ultimately in retirement, we're adjusting along the way.
Yeah.
This is something that's not set it and forget it. Things both positive and negative change the outcome of what retirement's going to look like, how the portfolio should be invested, how much cash should be available, how much you need to withdraw each month. And I think that's really one of the benefits of working with an advisor is knowing that we're there and we can be nimble and we can adjust the plan to accommodate all of these unexpected changes.
You mentioned unexpected things happen that they're completely unexpected, like we've had COVID, or it might be a recession or some other exogenous factor that completely throws your plans off and puts us back into the drawing board and having us redo everything and make sure that you're on track.
Yeah, and these periodic reviews are extremely important. I mean, as I mentioned, market performance due to unexpected factors, legislative changes. There's always things that change that, something as simple as the booming of AI. We want to make sure your portfolio can adapt to some of these market changes to help you kind of take advantage of some of these factors. And ultimately, with financial planning, we're doing a scenarios-based approach where we test kind of the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and the most likely outcome based on probability to kind of give you an illustration of what that's going to look like as you kind of approach and enter retirement.
Yeah, and it's never going to be perfect. I mean, there's no way we're going to be 100% accurate on that because it's all based off projected numbers. But the idea gives you like a sense of comfort. If you have a high probability of being able to meet your goals based on these scenarios, then you feel a little more confident knowing that you can spend that much. But again, you're never going to be 100% confident in the scenario analysis.
Yeah, and we do test those portfolios. We test at retirement. What happens if there's really bad years as I start my retirement? Can my portfolio survive that? And that is factored into any sort of analysis that we're doing. And again, as Ara mentioned, that does help create a lot of peace of mind knowing that you can execute on decisions confidently and that you won't be compromising your retirement as a result of these decisions.
And I'll tell you the last item, but definitely not the least important item, I would say it's equally important, if not more, is being emotionally ready for retirement. There's a lot of people that they just are not ready for retirement. Some people obviously they can't wait to retire, and they just they're excited about retirement, but there are other people that their career is to find themselves. They base their whole identity on their careers. And then when they retire, they're like, well, what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. So they kind of feel lost in that, and their anxiety builds up. And for those people, it's really important, actually, I think for anyone, it's important to have hobbies before you get into retirement, so that way you have something to do to keep yourself busy. I know my dad who's retired, I mean, he likes to do gardening, he likes to go fishing, he likes to do outdoor stuff. So for them, that really keeps them energized and active. And personally, I mean, I like to play pickleball and tennis, so I'm hoping to play that when I retire. I know you're a big golfer.
Yeah, I can't count down retirement fast enough to go play golf every single day. I think also when people have been so diligent for so long, and most of our clients are really diligent about their saving, retirement comes and they switch from saving money every week or every month to spending money every week and every month. And that is definitely a mental shift that leaves a lot of people feeling uncomfortable. We come in and sort of illustrate how this is possible and how it's okay, and show them those facts and figures. And it makes it kind of ease into the waters of retirement a little bit easier because of kind of the analysis behind the decision to retire.
Yeah, boy, that's really an excellent point about shifting in from getting that paycheck to now having to draw from savings that you have and hoping that savings is going to last you during your lifetime. That's a really emotional aspect of it. So we definitely help out with that perspective. Hey, if you're enjoying this video, please remember to like, subscribe, and share our channel. That way we can continue to create other content like this. So we've covered a lot of topics so far, and I think we should dive into some questions that we commonly get from clients and people that we talk to. And I'd say one question is, what's a realistic savings rate if you're about 10 years away from retirement? And we always hate to say this, but it really depends. I mean, have you been diligent in saving throughout your lifetime and consistently putting away? If you have been, then I'd say maintaining that savings rate is probably a good idea. And a good rule of thumb, if you've been diligent about saving throughout your lifetime, is about 20%. Right. But if you're behind on retirement savings, you haven't been saving, you're kind of catching up, then in that situation you need to be saving more. I mean, I would say maybe 50%.
As aggressive as you can
be. As aggressive as you can be, because if you're catching up, then you have to factor in the time value of money, right? The retirement's going to come really quickly, you want to make sure that you're well secured and save as much as possible.
Definitely. Another question that comes up a lot is, should I prioritize paying off my mortgage or maxing out my retirement accounts? Mm-hmm. Obviously, every situation is different, but there's two aspects to this. There's a financial aspect of this, and there's a psychological aspect to this. Financially speaking, if your mortgage rate's low in the 3 or 4%, then your money will go further for you if you invest it in your retirement accounts, right? That's the simple financial answer. The psychological answer is some people want to enter retirement without a mortgage, and to do that, they're going to have to aggressively pay it off. And the satisfaction of knowing that they won't have a mortgage payment in retirement is more valuable to them than the difference between what they'll miss out in the market and what they'll make paying off the mortgage. And honestly, we can do that analysis. We help people evaluate that and let them come to their own conclusions with us guiding them with the data.
Yeah, but I think that the financial aspect should not be underestimated. If you have a very low interest rate, like you said, 3, 4, sometimes people have them in the 2s. And in that case, you want to borrow as much money as possible at that rate, because the cost of funds is so low. And inflation alone means that's free money.
Right.
So we wouldn't recommend paying off your mortgage and instead having that money go into retirement savings, because it's going to grow at a much faster rate. Even though you're going to retire with a mortgage, the amount you're paying on that mortgage is going to deteriorate over time just because of inflation.
Absolutely.
Another question we get is, what is the best way to generate tax-efficient income during retirement? And as you know, we're big fans of having different tax buckets. Everything you own falls into one of 3 tax buckets. It's either taxable, such as real estate, a savings account, or a brokerage account. It's tax-deferred, such as like a 401k, an IRA, or maybe like Social Security, where you have to pay tax on when you get it. Or it's tax-free, such as a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k. Now, I know it's tempting for some people to put all their money into the Roth bucket because it's tax-free, but it really handcuffs you in just one bucket, one category of assets. You want to have diversification among different tax buckets in all 3 of the buckets that I just mentioned. That way, when it comes time to take money out, it gives you options. And that's the most tax-efficient way of taking money out of your portfolio when you have options. Because in that scenario, if you have a year where maybe you sold a large capital asset, like maybe you had a home that you sold it, you have a large capital gain, and then by doing so, your income's gone up, maybe you want to take a little bit more from the Roth IRA bucket at that time. Or if you have a year where you have a lot of capital losses, maybe that's going to get released from selling a home that had loss on it, then in that situation, maybe draw from a retirement account that's tax deferred because the income is not going to be that much on it. So it really depends on what's happening in that year, but it's super important to have the various tax buckets.